Hello guys, welcome to another day, another video. The topic that we're bringing to you guys today that we're discussing is the topic of sex, hookup culture, and how that is impacting our society as a whole and potentially even mental health, and where do we want to go from there. The sexual liberation has started in the United States around in the 70s, and over the last 50 years has propagated to the rest of the world through the influence of Western values as well as the internet. Me being Chinese and Asian descent, coming from the Asian culture, I was taught very, very different values growing up in terms of building relationships in compared to the Western. And today we're going to discuss with my buddy Eric in depth on both of these differences in culture as well as impact to the world. So yeah, welcome and join us. If you have any other topics that you think are diverse from what our views are, leave your comments below and happy to hear it too. Go ahead, Eric.
Alright, so think about it, guys. We're basically undergoing an act that leads to pregnancy without trying to get the person pregnant, right? That's what hookup culture is. So think about it. Like, we're taking out the natural function of sex and trying to make it into something that is almost unnatural to a certain extent, right? Because you're having the action of insertion and all that, and you're basically like pulling out or relying on birth control or condoms to basically make it so that you're not going to make this person pregnant at the end of the day, right? And you're trying to get this sensation of the sex, like the touching of the parts, and you're whittling it down to the point where you're only getting this sensation and you're not getting the product of the result of the finishing act. But at the same time, like, there's the fact that you do want to finish, and there's also the side of the story where there's people that actually don't lead to an orgasm at the end of the day, where they're holding their nut and basically, like, they might feel the orgasm but they're not releasing the semen, right? So to a certain extent, like, where on the spectrum do you fall, you as the viewer? Like, think about where you are in your hookup culture journey, whether you practice hookup culture or not, and when you get to the point of having sex with the female or male, depending on who's watching, when you get to that point, what exactly is the effect of this act that you're undergoing? The effect on you physically, emotionally, spiritually. These are the things that we want to explore during this video. All right, so physically, I just talked a little bit about it. You're getting this pleasure out of it, and you're getting these dopamine hits, and you're getting oxytocin and serotonin responses to the sexual act, and you're going to be, like, to a certain extent, bonding with this person, depending on how much emotional connection that you're investing into this interaction. To a certain extent, you can't necessarily get away from it completely, because you're gonna know the person's name that you're having sex with at the very least, right? So you're not gonna be able to circumnavigate the fact that you had sex with Sally or anything like that. So you have a certain connection that you're building when you undergo this action, and essentially you cannot necessarily circumnavigate the fact that you're having sex with this person. So you have to maneuver a certain way that allows for you to not necessarily be attached to the point where you're going to be invested deeply and heavily, where you want to necessarily have a relationship or babies. This is the hookup culture, right? Basically, you don't necessarily pass a certain point of no return where the person that you're having sex with actually wants a relationship, right? So you stop at a certain point, or you have sex on occasions that are sparse and not necessarily close enough together to the point where you are building something that you cannot necessarily control, something that gets out of hand, right? And in my case, I haven't necessarily gone through a lot of hookup culture. I've experienced a little bit of it, but not necessarily to the point where like I actually got in a relationship with someone. So like I dip my toes in it to the point where I'm able to get the F out before anything crazy happens. But you know, there's been certain situations where the girl's gotten more connected to me than I've gotten connected to her, and I had to dip out like real quick because I didn't necessarily want something that was greater than just having sex with this person. And to a certain extent, like in my values, like when I was younger, I wanted to have sex because like I was addicted to porn to a certain extent, and like I wanted to get the real thing. But now it's like I don't even look at girls the same way. Like I have a lot more respect for them than I did because I've been practicing semen retention to a certain extent and not necessarily busting any more nuts on frugal things like just watching porn.
Cheap sex,
and
almost like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think what you talked about, the idea of this, I mean the different ways of hookup culture and how do you finish I mean how you practice hookup culture is going to be diversely different per person and per individual. And I think centering on what is core that is relevant to everyone is, I think there's a dichotomy, and I guess it depends on in the BDSM world there is the dom and then the submissive. But in modern day, traditionally the dom is usually the more masculine men, and the submissive is more of the feminine women. But in the nowadays, depending on the individual, you could have the flip and the role of gender. So I think the hookup culture now, maybe it's always been, it's so diverse and could be practiced in so many different ways. But the way we focus on today is more the traditional sense, where the guy being more the dominant and then the female being more of the submissive. So in the aspect of your experience, when you come to your personal hookup culture experience, you said that you were getting more attached. The girl was getting more attached, and then you weren't feeling exactly the same. I think that comes to our biology, where the guy is generally the conqueror, the hunter, and the pursuer. And as for the women, they're more of the recipient, and is in their biology that through sex they increase in their oxytocin releasing, and also their bonding experience with whoever they have sex with. That's why in the sense of a hookup culture, I think that is more diverse now. But traditionally, the women being the one that is being pursued, they will grow in attraction as they have more sex with this guy. But for the guy, if they are in the mindset of the culture and not really in it to settle down, they don't have that bonding experience. So what you're left with is the top 1 or 2%, 5% guys basically wreaking havoc through the whole women population. And the women population think that everybody can get to with this guy, and they're left with a lot of heartaches. And I think the hookup culture is actually not accessible to most of the guys out there. I think more than 50 of the guys out there are very lonely, and And I think for a period of my time, before I met my wife and maybe have more success in my life, I was equally lonely. So I think loneliness is very common for young individuals, and I think more so nowadays because of this hookup culture, and all the women have shifted their attention because of internet to the top percentage of guys. So you have more guys that are lonely, and then also I would argue the same is true. All the guys are focused on the top 5-10% of women, and there's a lot of lonely women out there as well, because of that.
Absolutely. I think the proportion of guys being lonely is probably higher than the women being lonely, to a certain extent, because the fact that women have more options than guys do, and essentially women, they can choose more out of the pool of guys that are hitting them up. And that's where the hookup culture starts, is when the women are open to the guys basically starting a situationship with them. And when the women want to start a situationship with the certain guys that they're looking at, they respond more on the text. They'll start to show interest in ways that they don't show the other guys. And because they're choosing one or two of the top guys that are in their rotation, then what's happening is, like, the rest of the guys in their rotation are getting almost ignored to a certain extent, right? So that leaves more lonely guys than lonely girls. The girls are still getting attention from this massive amount of dudes, but they're only choosing a certain low frequency of the guys, right?
Yeah. And what happens if this continues, that you see, as a society?
Dang, that's a hard question, but I think, like, we're moving towards AI and AI robots and stuff like that to a certain extent, and there's gonna be a lot of perversion in the fact that we're doing unnatural things where guys are gonna start trying to make relationships with robots and shit like that. I think that's where we're going, to be honest. And it's kind of crazy to think about it, because, like, me as an individual, I can't necessarily connect with technology to that point where I'm, like, expressing myself in a way that's incongruent with my natural urges. And I think, like, a robot being a natural urge is not necessarily, I think that's a perversion. Like, if you have the brain to be able to comprehend and to accept the perverseness of being in a relationship with something that is technological, then you have some sort of underlying issues that haven't been addressed, and they basically, like, something has to lead you to that point, basically, like, almost frustration, and the creeping loneliness has to surmount in a way that is like, your brain is telling you that this outlet of natural relationships is almost impossible for me. So now that it's impossible for me, I go to this pathway where I'm trying to have a relationship with this AI robot, or talking to this woman. And because I'm talking to this woman on my phone, I'm getting this certain response that I crave, but to a certain extent it has to come from my own imagination that this thing is real, and that it's almost like a step away from reality, just like porn is a step away from reality, but an extra step away from reality, in which, like, you're trying to amass the certain feelings and the certain emotional responses that equate to a natural level of these hormones that are coming into your body, right? And if you don't get these natural hormones that are coming into your body, you're basically telling yourself that you're out of the race to a certain extent. And when you do that, like, you feel unmotivated to tackle reality in ways that are naturally based off of like what our ancestors have gone through, which is like, you want to impress a girl to a certain extent, so you express yourself in a way that does that, and you improve yourself in ways that will impress this girl or these women that are around you, so that you can like reach a level that you actually can mate with them. And if this like mechanism is gone, like, I think it's going to be extremely hard to find the same mechanism in the expression with robotics and technology, so much to the point where it's going to decrease the skill set of men to in regular society, to the point where the workforce is going to decrease, and there's going to have to be like solutions that come up out of it, and in which like someone's going to have to create something, a movement maybe, that allows for the revival of the certain aspects of manhood that are required for living in general.
Very interesting. You touched on quite a few tangents of this topic, and I just want to bring some highlights to them so that it's more succinct for us to all agree on. What you mentioned is that sex has always been a mechanism of natural selection, and women has a natural tendency to select the best of the best, and most of them they view as, you know, creepy or whatever, right? Non-attractive. And because of this natural selection, natural mechanism, it pushes us men as individuals. Either we are selected because we are either genetically, naturally blessed, or we work hard enough on ourselves that we eventually become desirable to the population. And I think that comes a lot with age, experience, and time. So what you're saying is that a lot of these guys, or girls, I guess, if they are, because of this basically exponentially accelerated hypergamy or natural selection, that naturally previously was geographically located, now it's globally in one almost like single landscape, but basically the landscapes have merged together, right? Like one city can meet girls from many city and even states now, and maybe countries or geographical locations now, as opposed to before it might just be the city or the town or the school. So this erosion of this boundary and natural selection process, what you're saying is a lot of these guys are gonna go to these perversion escapes because it's almost like they have no other choice because they're not being selected. And even though they're not being selected, they still have this innate craving of connection, innate craving of social needs, validation, affection, and that comes so naturally to all of us. And so I think that's what you were getting to, that we all have this innate craving to be loved, to be wanted, to be, just wanted, I think. And that gives us such a good feeling. Women want it. Women want attention for the same reason, and men wants love for the same reason, right? So we can't. to me, then it seems like this is a natural process. We're always gonna have a disproportionate of guys that is gonna be unhappy because they are the bottom of the barrel and women don't want them. Unless we can make every one of these men desirable. I think that is maybe the ideal we go for, is how do we make our young men, our next generation, as attractive as they can be, so they're all winners. But is it even possible to be in a world where there's all winners?
I think as you improve as a man, what happens is that the standards of women actually just go up. So it's kind of a catch-22 in the fact that if you want to improve as a man, you're just going to be in a pool of you're changing your trajectory, like landing space, basically. Like when you improve, you're going to be in a different pool of women, basically, and your standards as a man, when you improve, you have more self-esteem, they're going to increase as well.
Increase.
So
yes,
in a world where everyone is working on themselves so much that you all become the best versions of yourself, and like basically everyone's going to be like, to a certain extent, the best versions of themselves, and then what's going to happen is nobody's going to be the best versions of themselves when you look at it, because if everyone's doing the same thing, then it almost becomes redundant to a point in which like you lose sight of the actual value when you like don't slow down. So I think like the main key that we can take away from this is that there will be a movement in which people slow down their standards and they actually understand people to a level where they actually appreciate the qualities that are coming out of people again. But I think like as technology increases and improves, it's going to take away from that to the point where there's going to have to be a movement of people that actually shy away from technology, and like they drop their phones and shit like that. They go back to flip phones and they're like stand out in a different way that basically other people will see them as a rare commodity. And
actually what you're talking about is actually phenomenal. The detachment from phones is a crucial step nowadays, I think, to my own mental health, and also I think to everybody's mental health. These phones that we have nowadays are so addictive, and the apps, the way they're designed, are meant to suck you in like a black hole. So me personally, I found that I have a natural gravitation, because these are things are made for you to grab your attention. They vibrate, they have these phantom vibration that you feel now, because we all think that they're, we all want that craving, and they're designed to engage with our dopamine system in a way that it's extremely addictive. So when I'm having time with my baby, when I'm having time with my wife, I try very hard, and sometimes I do fail, to put my phone down. And it's only the time when you put your phone down that you return to reality, that you find the beauty of being a human, I think. The natural emotions. Oh, actually, one point that maybe I'm jumping around here now, but the idea I want to bring back is when you talk about the perversion and how they have to basically interact with AI to fill their some unmet needs, in a way that they have to fantasize or reimagine a robot that's almost, they know it's not real, but they want it to be real, right? That's where you were getting to. Crazily enough is that now AI is, I've tried to use ChatGPT just as a therapist, because I've heard that it's great for it. So I tried it out, and interestingly enough, it asked me a lot of introspective questions that I normally wouldn't ask. So I do see a lot of benefits of it as a tool, though I do think that trying to bond with it as an individual, it's going to be, I think, a whole can of worms that I have no idea how that's going to be like. But like you said, it's the way that's heading, and maybe it's inevitable because you do have a natural percentage that is unselected. However, I think as the benefit of the society, as the benefit for the individual's mental health, it would be ideal that we as a population work towards our best self, because that is good for our mental health, that is good for our physical health, and it's good for the society as a whole to raise morally and ethically correct directed individuals in this world. And I think in the Western society, based on my observations as maybe a secondary Westerner, I do find that Western values sometimes are very short-sighted, and I think it helps to have a longer vision to our societal values than short-term gratification. And I think hookup culture falls directly into this short-term gratification.
Yeah, so in hookup culture, I think the success of it, like when you're looking at what looks like a good hookup versus not a good hookup, you're looking at the value that you're getting out of the interaction. But essentially, improve yourself to the point where you're square on your values, and basically like you understand yourself to be able to express yourself in congruence with how you're feeling inside. And when you interact with the opposite gender or whoever you're going after, you want to shy away from technology to a certain extent. Like, yes, technology can be used as a tool to communicate your feelings with someone, but when you can do it in person, there's so much more value, there's so much more innate qualities that cannot necessarily be expressed through a phone or any other medium that is technologically based. So like, if you're going to spend time with someone, try to do it in person as much as possible. You don't want to necessarily rely on your social media following to be, a high number so that you can like hook up with these girls, because you're going to be taking away from the value of your own self to a certain extent, where if you're relying on your social media presence, then essentially there's a quality that you're taking away from your real life, and there's a disconnect in reality in which you are relying on this this work that you've done, as opposed to your innate natural abilities that are expressed through basically your in-person expressions. And like, there's qualities that can be taken from your in-person expressions that are not necessarily being able to be expressed through your social media or your technological presence.
What do you say to those people that feel awkward being in person now?
I think that being awkward in person is actually stems from the fact that more of your time is spent on the internet than is spent in person. So basically, if you want to reduce the awkwardness, you're going to have to go through the awkwardness, because the awkwardness is a natural expression of the fact that you're not necessarily spending time in person with people. And if you're not spending time in person with people, then what's going to happen is your brain is a malleable structure that is going to change in a way that sees the natural as what you're spending the most time in. So if you're spending more time on the internet than in person, you're going to feel awkward in person. So how to get away from that is you're going to have to go through the awkwardness in person. And that's actually the changing process is going to be happening in that time. And basically, you want to frame your expression in a way that allows for more calm experiences in person. So, do meditation, practice reading some books that is going to help frame your mindset in person interactions, right? But don't be afraid of the awkwardness. The awkwardness is going to be a natural expression because of the fact that you're at the current moment, you're leaning away from the in-person experiences, right? So just go ahead and put yourself in those experiences more often, and you're going to basically be chipping away at it in a way that you're going to be feeling less awkward per time that you're spending in in-person interactions, right? And you're going to be sharpening that skill again. And the fact that, we all grew up in a situation where we were surrounded by a lot of people in school, right? So in school, you have, 30 different classmates that you're sitting in close proximity to. And, after the ouch and the disease or the sickness that just happened a few years ago, we were all encouraged to stay apart from each other. But basically what that did was it was a separation from the interactions that we have with people. So, if you take care of your immune system to a certain extent, then you don't have to worry about those things, right? But like getting back together and, reigniting those flames that we've lost over the time is going to be a process that we all have to go through in order to reinvigorate those aspects of life that are necessary for like these non-awkward interactions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's very well said that you're saying the awkwardness comes from basically inexperience and the lack of exposure to the actual social environment. That's why there's this awkwardness. So the more one step into it, the discomfort, the awkwardness, they will learn and they will basically shift, and their brain is malleable, so they will continue to grow and adapt to this changing experience. They'll get more and more mature with their awkwardness, basically. And what you said is true. When I go to Asia, there's a difference in social etiquette in every culture, but I can say that in a place like India or China where population is boom and you don't really have an opportunity to shy away from people, there's a lot less awkwardness in people because people are forced to engage. And conversely is true, people tend to be more sly and deceiving when you are in a giant population. And so I think the value that US has is in the everyday common people. When you interact with them, there's a lot more honesty. And then with the others, there's Asian culture, there's where it's in locations where it's more populated, maybe it's have to do with social pressure and living pressure, but in places like Thailand, China, or India, there's tend to be more deceit in personal interaction, or maybe just emotional intelligence. But I do see that there's more layer to the interaction in some of those settings, as opposed to um, in the US where interactions are more single layer. But I guess that maybe depends on the group and interaction as well. Yeah.
So in hookup culture, you're maximizing your relationship with a person to the point where you're maximizing the sexual interactions that you're going to be having with this person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, we've talked about the fact that technology is like a tool that you can use in hookup culture, but you don't want to rely on technology to carry you through the interaction. Unless you have like an insane following to a certain extent, then that's going to be your representation, right? And in that representation, like, you have certain expectations. I'm not necessarily like someone who's balling on social media or anything like that, but in that representation, I suspect that you would have certain expectations that that this person is going to see you in a certain way, and they're not necessarily going to look at the surface you. They're going to look at the person that they see on the social media. And that's why, like, I say that social media is kind of dangerous to a certain extent, that if you share your social media with someone, that they're not going to necessarily look at you the same way as if you don't share your social media with this person. And if you don't share your social media with the person, then they're forced to look at you as a whole person, and the expression that you give to them in the moments that you interact with them, right?
What about using social media as a tool instead of letting that define you? What if social media just adds to another layer of you instead of dominating all of you? But I think that takes practice. Not everybody can execute to that level.
Yeah, because you're, to a certain extent, your technological expression is going to be a part of you in a way that you can't necessarily detach from. So if you never introduce it in the first place, then what you're doing is you're going to take out a certain part of the equation that could help you, but it could hurt you at the same time, especially if you're looking for like actual like value in the courting process, in a way that, you know, you're doing hookup culture in order to find the person that you actually want to find. And, you know, if you introduce those things later down the road after you've already had sex, then what you're doing is you're making it so that the corridor of information that you're giving the person is only a specific part of you that is separate from the social media expression of you, which means that this person is going to have to take in all the values of you that are raw and real, right?
Interesting way of describing it. And I want to say, everyone out there that's watching this video until now, if you want to learn more about how to become a creator in the way, not of a content creator, but a creator as an individual, meaning you be the creator, the god of your own life, you can, you know, look at this video that is up at this corner. We're going to explore that topic next. And what you're talking about, Eric, in the courting process, I think courtship is different for every person, and every man have their own way, depending on what they see as their ideal candidate. I think based on the way that we're biologically wired individually, and based on the way that we were raised by our family, whatever trauma or whatever not trauma that happened in our life, we seek in a mate that is sort of unique in that way. And because of that, I think the courting process and the courtship will vary in that way. For someone that has a lot of trauma, they will likely maybe be attracted to some traumatic behavior or narcissistic behavior because they lack something in their childhood. But maybe for someone that was raised in a family that is more balanced and harmonious, they are actual natural deterior to these narcissistic tendencies because they know better that these are not real. So for me, my personal courting process, I actually reveal very little of myself at the beginning of meeting anyone, and I give very little value to them in the beginning. But as I see that they prove themselves to be a quality individual, I tend to invest more and more money and time and energy into these relationships that I think are important and I would like to keep. So that same goes for the women that I let in my life. I actually give them very, very, very little value other than my own personality at the beginning, and only the basic things. I do buy dinner. I don't do buy the basic stuff, but I don't really provide much on top of that until I do see a quality potential fit in personality and maybe something worth a long term. But in the sense of the individuals that are in it for the hookup and not for a long term or any quality relationship, all that is out the door, right? They don't care about what personality you are. They don't care about what skills you have. Do you have the potential to be a quality partner? Do you have the qualities to be a good mother? I think all those are out the door and questions not even asked when you're in the hookup culture. And yeah, so I think the way you look at courtship is also very different when you come into the mindset of I'm in it for a hookup, I'm in it for a good time, rather than I'm in it to build a relationship for a long time.
Yeah, I think all those points are valid. Maybe the personality might still matter in hookup culture, because you want to,
sure, yeah.
You want to still
fun,
get
right?
interactions. Yeah, the interaction has to be a good time for you.
There's one more topic that I thought would be interesting is, the start of the sexual revolution in the 70s and liberation of sex and a little bit of a rebellion to the conservative traditional values, right? That was started to liberate the idea of sex and shame to sex. It's supposed to liberate the population from the shame of and the shackle of traditional values, right? It was started because of their maybe perhaps what they felt overbearing of these traditional values and to bring equality to the genders. And that movement has gone on for 50 years now. And how do you feel the balance between conservative values, where the men provides, the women are in more of a supporting role, to now where there's a liberation of hookup culture and maybe sometimes the loudest noise is not the correct one? Where do you see the ideal balance be between conservative values, also the hookup cultures that you see today with all the AI? Maybe this is a very broad topic, but do you see that we're going towards something real, or are we in this forever oscillation?
I think it's going to be a little bit of both of that. Like, we're going to have oscillating factors in the respect that, there's going to be certain people that want to retain the values of hookup culture, and retain the essential functions of a man in a relationship versus a female in a relationship. Whether that's because the people want to represent a certain role and they want to fill that role in order to have a purpose in the interactions. But at the same time, there's going to be, gender equality and human equality in the fact that we are all humans at the end of the day, so that we can have the same expression as one another, in the fact that, we could split 50-50 on a lunch. Like, we're both paying for something. At the end of the day, like, depends on how you want to slice the cake. But with AI coming out and that being a certain form of expression that can be exercised in the future, I think that we're going to be seeing like almost like a third gender kind of pop up, in the fact that it was traditionally male and female, but now it's male, females, and robots.
Damn.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? And what's going to happen is that humans are going to evolve alongside this technology to the point where either the technology is going to be accepted or it's going to be rejected. And there's always going to be a small subset of people that accept it, and at least a small subset of people that reject it, depending on which way it goes, right? So, I think that we're going to see in the near future a representation of these populations that people are expressing themselves in ways that are congruent with the technology, and then there's going to be people that are rejecting it, and rejection culture is like not necessarily as strong as representation as the expression culture, in which like there's a strong population of people that reject LGBT movement, but the LGBT movement is only becoming stronger because of it, right? They have pride, and they essentially maximize their pride with their parades, and they see themselves as becoming stronger with the more rejection that they face. It's a perseverance that's growing within them, and I think that a certain aspect of the future technological relationships that are going to be growing is going to also have that same sort of aura around it, in which that people are going to have a strong pride over their relationships, that they're going to want to defend them even more strongly the more rejection that comes their way.
Interesting. So it's going to be quite interesting world that we're going to see coming in the next few decades to come, huh? Few years or few decades.
Decades and years. I think we're going to see like an exponential change eventually.
Okay, well, that about wraps it up for us today. Where me and my buddy Life Erik meets every week, once a week, to discuss interesting topics about the world, society, and even life. If there's a topic that you like us to discuss and explore, drop a comment below, and we'll see you guys next week. Thank you. Peace.
Bye.